Hey guys, Marissa here, and welcome to my new reading corner. You might have already seen this if you follow me on Instagram, but obviously I got another shelf, and it means that I got to get all of my books from my parents' house. It means that I got to empty the big box of books I had sitting in my living room, and it makes me really happy. I have a reading corner, you guys. I didn't even think about the fact that I can now film with books on both sides of me, and it's just making me very happy. I will have a bookshelf tour or organization video up at some point this month, but I'm not exactly happy with how I've got everything organized. Some of the shelves I love, some of them I just kind of like threw books on there in a rough organizational scheme, and I'm not quite sure I'm happy with it yet. So sometime this month I will film a bookshelf tour organization thing, just not right this moment. However, as I was putting books on my shelves, I was looking at some of them and thinking, you know what, I'm never gonna reread that, or I didn't really enjoy it and I don't know why I'm hanging on to it. So I've decided that this video is going to be my very first unhaul. I do want to preface this by saying that these are not bad books by any means. They're just books that didn't really work for me, or books that I don't feel like I need to hang on to. So I've got a big stack here, and I'm just gonna very scientifically grab what's on top. The first book I have on the stack is The Impossible Fairy Tale by Han Yu-ju, which was translated from the original Korean by Janet Hong and was published by Grey Wolf Press. Now, I was sent this for review by Grey Wolf Press. I did review this on the channel here and on April Magazine, so if I can find those links, I will link them in the description. And I think you won't be surprised that I'm unhauling this if you have seen or read that review. This book is interesting in concept. It's about two Korean schoolgirls, one who is a girl who's like got the best luck. She has quote-unquote all the colors. She's beautiful. Everybody loves her. The other is a girl who is so ignored that we don't even get a name for her. She is a child of darkness. She has all these like kind of creepy tendencies, and she takes all of her classmates' notebooks and writes disturbing messages in them just because she can. Again, not a bad book, but the writing style just really was not for me. I can't even describe it. It's just weird. There's really no dialogue, and then the second half of the book completely changes perspectives, and yeah, I'm never gonna reread it. Not for me giving this away. Actually, looking at my stack here, I do have quite a few review copies that I am getting rid of, which I think speaks a lot to how I was accepting review copies. Even just last year, I was a little bit more like willy-nilly with what I was accepting. I think was really excited at first that people were willing to send me anything at all. Now I'm definitely far more selective. So a lot of the stuff, again, isn't bad. It's just I probably shouldn't have accepted it because it's not necessarily my taste. An example of that, I think, is Perceived Distance from Impact by Camden Hilliard. Now, this was sent to me for review by Black Lawrence Press, and again, not a bad book. This is a poetry chapbook, and it's actually a really interesting collection because he's coming to his poetry from a Black queer perspective, which is not something I have read from before. He's got really colorful language. He plays a lot with kind of accepted versions of history. He plays with labels, and he does like interesting things where, you know, some of the poetry is actually blacked out. So if you're interested in really experimental, different poetry, I think you might enjoy this, but for me, it's just not something that I'm ever gonna go back to and reread, so I've decided to pass this on. The next book on my stack here is The Gangster of Love by Jessica Hagedorn. This follows a young woman named Rocky Rivera, who is a Filipino-American, like the author herself, who we follow first in 1960 San Francisco, and then I think we follow her all the way through like the 1980s in Manhattan. If you like sex, drugs, rock and roll, you might enjoy this. If you like Asian American narratives, you might also like this. It's just not something that I'm ever really going to go back to and reread, so I do think this could find a better home elsewhere. Oh, and I feel like I should mention that this was not a review copy. This was something I read in college. I have some more poetry here, though this time it is the Penguin Book of Romantic Poetry. This is a massive chunker. This is something I had to pick up for AP English in high school, and I've held on to it thinking that someday I would develop a stronger passion for poetry, and I really haven't. I do like some of the Keats stuff in here. I like some of the Wordsworth stuff in here as well, but realistically, I can always go to the library if I get a hankering for that. I mean, this is a chunker that takes up a lot of space on the shelf, so this is going to a better home. 2 more review copies here, the first of which is The Yoga of Max's Discontent, a novel by Karan Bajaj. Now this, I read, gosh, a couple of years ago now, and I actually have a full review on this, so if you do want to check that out, you can. I will link it here. This is the story of a young man who comes from a poverty background and manages to like make it to Wall Street. He makes it big. He, you know, quote unquote achieves the American dream, and yet finds that he is less content than ever. So hence discontent. Obviously, see what I did there? So he starts looking into things like meditation and yoga, and his journey takes him to like a yoga, like a yoga commune type thing in the Himalayas, and it basically follows his kind of personal development growth story. Now, I found it really interesting learning more about the philosophy behind yoga, learning more about these communities that do actually exist in the world where yoga is practiced literally as a whole way of being. I found that very interesting. I do think this was fairly well written. I had a few problems with the character of Max, if I remember correctly, but this is, generally speaking, very well written. I just don't think it's a book that I'm going to go back to ever, really. So yeah, again, passing this one on. Last review copy on the stack is Pigeon Blood Red by Ed Duncan. Now this I was sent last year for review by the author. It's self-published, and I really wanted to enjoy this because it sounds like a thriller. You know, it's a guy who I believe kills, he's like a loan shark's hired muscle, and he tries to kind of get out of that life and finds that that's harder than he thought it was going to be. So it sounded really interesting, but the writing style just did not jive with me. It felt like it needed a stronger editorial hand in there, and so again, I will be passing this on. I always feel really bad about getting rid of review copies, especially when they're self-published, but you know, my library has a really great little store where anybody buying things, the donations go right back to the library. So they are always looking for new interesting books, and they do library sales. So I'm just gonna give all these to them, and then they can hopefully find better homes than these books had with me. And now I have a huge stack of YA here, because back when I first started BookTube like 5 years ago, I was really into watching like the YA BookTube community, because I had not yet found like people who make the kind of videos that I make now, more about literary fiction, translated fiction, that sort of thing. Okay, so first of all, we have a big stack of, what was this called? The Lunar Chronicles here. I believe this is in the correct order. We have Cinder, Scarlet, and Cress. Now, of these 3, I have read both Cinder and Scarlet. I actually really enjoyed Scarlet. I do think I enjoyed Cinder, but I think after reading Scarlet, I enjoyed Scarlet more, if that's correct. I don't know, I'll have to go back and check old videos. Ooh, please don't, they're so bad, cringe. I have never read Cress, so these are in beautiful condition. Again, I probably could try and sell these, but I would rather just give this to the library and allow them to get the proceeds. So I'm gonna be giving up on these simply because I'm just not interested anymore. You know, I always thought, okay, well, I'll hang on to them, and then when I get the YA craving again, I will read them, and I believe there's 2 more books in this series, so I thought, you know, I'll just pick them up if I ever feel like it. It's been like 4 or 5 years and I just haven't felt like it, so I think it's time for them to move on. And then lastly, I have The Fifth Wave here. This is YA apocalyptic, I believe. I think it's about like the Earth's, yeah, here. The Earth's Last Survivors. I actually picked this up used at a bookstore in San Francisco when I was in college, lent it out to my cousin, and he just recently returned it to me, like in the last year or so, and just kind of have completely lost interest. So again, this will find a better home elsewhere. And that's it. Those are the books that I have decided to remove from my shelves and pass on to better owners. You know, I am a firm believer in one of the reasons there are so many books out there is that just not every single book is going to be for us. So it's better to give books you don't feel like you jive with to people who might, than just like leave them taking up room on your shelves. I feel like that's kind of unnecessary. Plus, I now have a bunch of like space, like here. Here, look, there's space here. There's like not a half shelf, like a quarter of a shelf here that I can fill up. So I feel like when I drop these books off at the library bookstore, I'm gonna end up leaving with a bunch. We shall see. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you next time. Bye.